Good evening. I call to order the February 13th, 2023 regular board meeting of the Richland 2 Board of Trustees. The agenda for tonight's meeting has been published and made available publicly. I please have a motion regarding the approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chairman,
Mrs. Nash.
I move to approve the agenda for the February 13th, 2024 regular school board meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Nash, seconded by Mrs. Agostini. Is there any discussion? All right, board members, we're going to hand vote for this vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Vote's unanimous, 7 yes, 0 no. We will move into executive session now. May I have a motion to go into executive session?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Washington.
I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of student appeals, student admission request into the district's adult ed program, student PE exemption request, breach of contracts, employment recommendations and certified releases, receipt of legal advice for an insurance matter, personnel matter regarding employment contracts, contractual matter regarding guest teacher services, and personnel matter regarding superintendent's evaluation goal.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Washington, seconded by Mrs. Nash. And the motion was to go into executive session for the purpose, oh, there it is on the screen. Is that correct, Mrs. Washington? All right, board members, all you that are on your computer, vote with your computer, rest up. Well, let's all hand vote. Everybody in favor of going to executive session, raise your right hand. All right, it's 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. We will now convene in executive session. May I have a motion to end the executive session?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Agostini.
I move that we adjourn executive session at 6:30 p.m.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Agostini and seconded by Mrs. Nash to end executive session. Is there any discussion? All right, board members, please vote.
Tell me if yours is okay. I made it.
The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. We will now move to our inspirational moment, Pledge of Allegiance. It will be my privilege to introduce tonight's guest. I'd like to introduce Ms. Sheena Bowles.
Good evening, Chairman Trapp, members of the board, Dr. Moore. I'm Shannon Holland. I'm the principal at Bethel Hanbury. And tonight we come to bring you the great happenings that are at Bethel Hanbury and how we spread joy through our daily experiences. A few years ago, we decided to be part of a pilot that focused on social emotional wellness for our staff. I didn't know the path, but I knew the perfect person for this job. And my 4th grade teacher, she is also known as our joy coach, will be here tonight to tell you exactly what she does for us at Bethel Hanbury.
Good evening, everyone. As Ms. Holland so eloquently introduced me and given me such an amazing opportunity, I want to take the time to introduce myself also. I am Sheena Bowles. I'm 4th grade teacher, social emotional wellness lead, also known as joy coach. This evening, I want to take a moment to share one of my first loves, or as I like to call it, one of my first joys of education with you, or rather all of the joys of education. Essentially, for those who know me well, they know that I live and breathe all of the joys of education. If someone asks, or if someone were to ask, I would hope that those same people who know me well, they would tell you that I myself am one of those joys. Certainly, this inspirational moment is not just all about me, but it is more about my role as joy coach. So if you will allow me to coach you, or for the sake of this inspirational moment, allow me to inspire you for a second. Take a second or two to think about all that brings you joy. Now think about how you contribute to those joys. For example, I told you that education is one of my first loves or joys. Well, I contribute to the education profession by becoming an advocate of, being one of the joys of, and perhaps by being deliberate with my efforts to make the best of my and the educational journey of others around me. Each time I present to our faculty and staff, that joy moment, as we call it, usually begins with a quote. So today, I'll do the same for you. Here's a quote by an unknown author. I am are some of the most powerful words, for they shape our reality. And might I add, perhaps have a positive influence on the reality of others. With that said, I am an educational advocate who is intentional about the social emotional aspect of education. I am essentially an educational joy to be reckoned with. I certainly mean that in the most humble way. However, my goal is to inspire you to be the joy in and of your roles. Indeed, I'm more than just a joy coach, but through my role as one, I have been able to have a positive influence on my own reality as well as the reality of others. Indeed, here are some of the joyful realities that we have at Bethel-Hamberry. Last year, Ms. Holland's theme for our school was finding joy in the journey. To continue her theme, we've come up with a mission and vision that centers around being unconditionally well, which means focusing on all that is good in spite of our realities, our difficulties. Some of those realities, those joyful realities, include our joy moments that we have at Bethel-Hamberry, whether it's through the Wednesday emails that I send out at 6:45, it's the joy moments at our faculty meetings that includes activities or social emotional wellness activities that our teachers can modify for their students. I beg Ms. Holland to be at our team leaders meetings to give our teacher leaders some joy and just remind them of wellness. We have joy activities that I send through our wellness emails, which includes instructions on how to play a game of tag, to include staff members tagging their colleagues with joy messages. We also have Bethel-Hamberry Elementary's Wellness Den, which is a website that I update often or weekly for our staff members. It includes classroom, social emotional learning strategies, as well as educator strategies for them themselves. For our community, we have our Family Joy Night, or we have had our Family Joy Night, which included activities for everyone in our community. We've done positive affirmation bingo. There was rock painting. We also have there was also our Sweet Challenge, where there was a list of things that Ms. Holland gave the community to go out and do with anyone that they truly care about. And then they took the balloons that you can see in the picture, and that was them taking care of practice and taking care of the people in their community. We have our Joy Coach Corner, which is kind of like our Wellness Den, but it's just for our community, for our families. So I post family wellness strategies there. There's also pictures of wellness in action and what does unconditional wellness look like. There's a form that our community members can submit, whether they're doing activities with their family that they would like to share with us and things of that nature. Our Joy Run has been a huge hit at Bethel-Hamberry. This is where our community, our staff members, they get to join together and just they're walking, they're running. Something unique about our Joy Run is that it includes positive messages throughout the path. I think one heartwarming moment for me was I watched a kid get really, really tired, and then he stopped to read one of the messages, which includes something like, "You are enough," or "You are powerful." So that was a powerful moment for me. This is just a picture of our mini joy hours that we have at Bethel-Hamberry. This is for our staff members to focus on social emotional wellness. Our last joy hour in January, staff members created vision boards. We've had a choose joy hour where one of our staff members decided that she was going to teach everyone how to crochet. We've done painting, family feud, there's karaoke, just a variety of ways for our staff members to focus on their wellness. Certainly, I can talk all night about all of the joyful realities at Bethel-Hamberry, but I know you have important business to get to. One of the quotes that I live by and the staff knows that I live by is that she leaves a little sparkle wherever she goes. In my role as joy coach, those sparkles have become joys. Discovering my own joy, as well as helping others to do the same, I leave you with this one inspirational challenge. You heard me mention that I'm a proud educational advocate. I'm one of the joys of education, and I stand before you today because I am a joy coach. The inspirational challenge for you today and every day after is for you to discover the joys that you have and need in order to be unconditionally well, in order to focus on all that is good in spite of. I challenge you to be the joy of your role as sister, brother, teacher, mom, dad, board member, or as a valuable community member. We began this inspirational moment or joy moment with a quote, and now I'll leave you with another one. To make someone's soul smile is the purest form of happiness or joy. May you make soul smile in all that you do today and every day, while inevitably spreading joy and happiness.
Would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I sure will. Everyone, please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Dr. Scott.
I would like to say something before you leave, Ms. Joy, Coach, Mrs. Bowles. I do want to say I had the opportunity to visit your class last year, and you are exactly what you said here. And not only that, I'm not sure if you received my emails, but it was multiple parents that actually contacted me last year and this year to say how they have found so much joy with you teaching their child. So I want to say thank you for all that you do and that you continue to do. So thank you.
And if I may just mention, I of course, met Ms. Bowles whenever she had a joy run. They had a joy run, I guess, about a year ago, and it made me feel good. And I thought, hey, that's very positive. I appreciate the experience.
And one other thing, Mr. Chair, just a point of privilege. I see Mrs. Ovita Glover here, who is the president of the Columbia branch of the NAACP. So I just want to say thank you and your team, if you have a team with you, for gracing our meeting this evening. So thank you.
All right, we will now move to item 5.1. May I please have a motion regarding the approval of the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman,
Mrs. Nash.
I move to approve the consent agenda for the February 13th, 2024 regular board meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Nash and seconded by Mrs. Washington. Is there any discussion? All right, if that's correct on the screen, let's, board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. All right, we'll now move on to public participation. 3 individuals have signed up to address the board. You will be given 3 minutes to address the board. To assist with timing, the lights on the table in front of me will change colors from green to yellow to red. When you have 30 seconds remaining, the light will turn yellow. When your time is up, the light will turn red. And you will hear an audible tone indicating your time to speak has expired. Before we begin, I will remind you that our meetings are streamed live and recorded. According to policy BEDH, comments from the public should not include gossip, defamatory words, or abusive and vulgar language. The policy also prohibits in public session any expression of personal complaint about individual school personnel or any other person connected with the school system. Specific students or personnel issues should be handled through the appropriate procedures as indicated in the district policy. Questions asked during public participation typically will be referred to a staff member for response at a later time. Our first participant this evening will be Tiffany Jones. All right. We'll now hear from Latasha Hicks.
Hello. I just wanted to come today really quickly to look at all of you in the face and say justice for London. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last participant will be Shedrick Garland.
Good evening, everyone. I know this topic, I basically have a question. It's so unpopular, probably at this time, talking about joy and everything else. Tonight, I just have a question for the suffering teachers, the ones who keep a smile on their face, but they're suffering in silence. My question is, why are students who have a proven track record of violating their own IEP and 504 plans, who constantly are misbehaving both minor and major, allowed to return back from the district office to the classroom, in most cases without resolve? Again, these students continue to display the same behaviors time and time again. Many staff members and teachers themselves know well enough that teachers across the country are fed up with the behavior of students when disciplinary actions are handed out, and the response always seems to be, send them back. Where's the compassion for the teachers? It is one thing to have policies and procedures in place, but staff and teachers feel hopeless when the system is not addressing the root of these behaviors. I hear far too often, what are we here for? To answer the question honestly, I know this is just my opinion, it feels like some teachers are in the system to serve as a doormat. So my overall question is, are there any procedures or anything, I know you guys discuss this stuff, time and time again, but are there any procedures set moving forward to how we're going to address these behaviors of the students who are constantly causing disruptions for these suffering teachers? Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move on to voting on executive session items. May I please have a motion regarding the student appeals?
Mr. Chairman,
Mrs. Nash.
I move to uphold the administration's recommendation for student number 1.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion has been made by Mrs. Nash and seconded by Mrs. Porter. Is there any discussion? Ms. Nash, is that correct on the screen?
Yes, other than the extra S on students.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding student number 2?
Mr. Chairman,
Mrs. Nash, I'm sorry.
I move to uphold the administration's recommendation for student number 2.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Nash, seconded by Mrs. Porter. Is there any discussion? Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding student number 3?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Nash,
I move to uphold the administration's recommendation for student number 3.
is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion was made by Mrs. Nash, seconded by Mrs. Porter. Is there any discussion? Is that correct on the screen, Ms. Nash?
That is correct.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding student number 4?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Nash,
I move to uphold the administration's recommendation for student number 4.
is there a second? Motion has been made by Mrs. Nash, seconded by Mrs. Porter. Is there any question or any discussion? Is that correct on the screen?
That is correct.
All right, board members, please vote. Vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding student number 5?
Mr. Chairman,
Mrs. Nash,
I move that student number 5 return to their home school on strict probation.
is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Nash and seconded by Dr. Scott. Is there any discussion? Is that correct on the screen, Mrs. Nash?
That is correct.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding student number 6?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Nash,
I move to uphold the administration's recommendation for student number 6.
is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Nash, seconded by Mrs. Porter. Is there any discussion? Is that correct on the screen, Ms. Nash?
That is correct. That is correct.
Board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding student admission request into the district's adult education program?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Porter,
I move to approve the students for the district's adult education program for students numbers 1 through 8.
is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Porter, seconded by Dr. Scott. Is there any discussion? Is that correct on the screen, Ms. Porter?
That's correct.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding the student PE exemption request?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Agostini.
I was going to respond to Mrs. Nash, too. As Mrs. Nash, I move to deny the student's request for a PE exemption.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion is made by Mrs. Agostini, seconded by Mrs. Nash. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Agostini.
Thank you. Yes, according to South Carolina Code 292980B, school boards are allowed to offer exemptions for a student for physical education if it pertains to religious purposes or if there's a doctor's note that jeopardizes the health or the well-being of the student. And I have received neither of those, so I cannot support, and that's why I made the motion to deny the request.
Thank you, Mrs. Agostini. Any other discussion? All right, is that correct on the screen, Ms. Agostini?
It is.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding the breach of contracts?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Washington.
I move that we direct administration to make a formal complaint to the State Board of Education regarding employee number 1.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Washington, seconded by Mrs. Nash. Is there any discussion? Ms. Washington, is that correct on the screen?
Yes.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding employee number 2?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Washington.
I move that we direct the administration to make a formal complaint against employee number 2.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Ms. Washington, seconded by Mrs. Agostini. Is there any discussion? Is that correct on the screen, Ms. Washington?
Yes.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding employee number 3?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Washington.
I move that we direct administration to make a formal complaint against employee number 3.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Washington, seconded by Mrs. Agostini. Is there any discussion? Is that correct on the screen, Ms. Washington?
Yes.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding employee number 4?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Washington.
I move that we direct administration not to make a formal complaint to the State Board for employee number 4.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Washington, seconded by Dr. Scott. Is there any discussion? Ms. Washington, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding employee number 5?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Washington.
I move that we direct administration to make a formal complaint against employee number 5.
Is there a second?
Second?
Motion has been made by Ms. Washington, seconded by Mrs. Agostini. Is there any discussion? Is that correct on the screen, Ms. Washington?
Yes.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding employee number 6?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Washington.
I move that we direct administration not to make a formal complaint regarding employee number 6.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Ms. Washington, seconded by Dr. Scott. Is there any discussion? Is that correct, as it's on the screen, Ms. Washington?
Correct.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding employee number 7?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Washington.
I move that we direct administration not to make a formal complaint to the state regarding employee number 7.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Ms. Washington, seconded by Dr. Scott. Is there any discussion? Is that correct on the screen, Ms. Washington? All right, is that now correct on the screen? All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding employment recommendations and certified releases?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Agostini.
I move that we approve the employment recommendations and certified releases.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Agostini, seconded by Dr. Scott. Is there any discussion? All right, is that correct on the screen, Ms. Agostini?
It is.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. We will now move to Section 8. The agenda item in this section is an update on longevity the longevity bonus. Dr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to have our Senior Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Nancy Williams, come to the podium. She's going to share with the board our plan for the longevity bonus that the board had already approved.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Dr. Moore. I just want to briefly discuss a few details regarding the longevity bonus as approved by the board at the January 16th board meeting. Okay, so that longevity bonus that was approved is essentially designed to be a tool for rewarding staff of Richland 2 for their dedicated service to the district. There's a tiered compensation structure for that bonus, and we anticipate making those bonus payments to eligible employees in the month of June based upon the completion of their contracted days, beginning with employees who have completed at least 1 year of service. Just a reminder that this bonus is funded from non-recurring dollars, so it is not a recurring line item in the district's operating budget. Okay, so the structure of the bonus would go to those individuals, again, that have completed at least 1 year of dedicated service to Richland 2. And the amounts would range from $1,000 up to $1,500. Those bonus amounts are net of taxes, so those are the actual amounts that employees would receive. And determination for those years of service would be based upon the most recent employment date. And so the bonus plan does not include guest teachers, nor does it include bus drivers and bus monitors because, again, they're compensated under a different incentive plan. But like I said earlier, it is coming from the non-recurring funds from the FY23 increased surplus. Mr. Chair, I'm available if there are any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Board members, are there any questions or comments?
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Agostini.
Thank you so much. My question is, we're talking about it's going to be paid out in June. So anybody who completes their contract in June.
Their contracted days in June, both certified and classified. Yes,
Okay, but that does not mean that they've signed to stay on for the 24-25 year.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
That's correct,
That's
okay.
correct.
And then can you remind us of the total dollar amount again for this longevity bonus?
$5.2 million.
$5.2 million, thank you
ma'am.
so much.
Mr. Chair.
Dr. Scott.
Thank you so much. Actually, that was similar to the question that I had. And I guess when we're talking about the funds and the taxpayers' money, was there not a way we could find out the ones who spent that 1 year but not returning, that we not give them that bonus if they're not returning back to us? Did we get a dollar amount of that?
Can you ask me that question one more time? Dr.
Okay,
Scott? I wanna
if
make
you
sure I
did
have
not
it
sign your
correctly.
contract for the next school year,
Gotcha.
but you still receive $1,000, so it's almost like we're paying you to leave. It's a joke. But anyway, so I'm just curious to know how much money would that be, because I would love to just retain that money here in Richland too.
Gotcha.
And they not qualify for that bonus.
We definitely thought about that, but because it was sold as a longevity bonus and not a retention bonus per se, and the longevity is thank you for what you have contributed to the district, that's why we went with those lines. But we definitely can keep a track. We can account for and track how many teachers or not just teachers, but just individuals that receive the bonus but don't come back at the start of the next year.
Okay, thank you. And thank you to you and your team for all the work that you guys have done and continue to do as well.
Thank you.
All right, is there
Mr.
any other
Chair.
questions, board members?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Porter.
I just wanted to make a comment. In looking at this with the 1 to 10 years, I'm thinking that you can have someone who comes in as a first year, they're getting a signing bonus. Then they could leave and we're giving them more money. And then they can go to another district and get another signing bonus. What does that say to our 20-plus year teachers or our teachers who have put in their 28 years and they're trying to decide if they want to come back as a retiring, working retiree when you're in a sense, rewarding those who haven't put in the time. I was looking at this as a longevity bonus, but also as a retention tool, as another strategy to keep our teachers here, because that is a dire need right now. We're being reminded of this crisis left and right. And if we don't use this as an opportunity to keep teachers, I feel like we're missing an opportunity.
Understood, but just one clarifying point. So those individuals that receive the signing bonus would not receive the longevity bonus because they would not have completed the 1 year of service at the June timeframe. So if they started in July, August, or whatever, we would not count. They would essentially be 0-year teachers, just for the purposes of this slide.
Also, Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
classified staff members do not receive a contract until they come back to work at the beginning of the school year. Certified are on contract. So if it's the desire of the board, the will of the board for this to be longevity and retention, we would not be able to pay this out until after school started next school year, because we would not know which teachers are returning as well as which classified staff are returning.
Mr. Chair, can I add something to
Yes,
that?
Dr. Scott.
I just want to make sure I'm clear on what Dr. Moore just said, because we will know what teachers returning because they signed that intent and contract back in April. So we already know that they're returning back to us in August. So,
But if they breach that contract by not returning, it would have already been paid.
right, if they breach it.
If they
but-
breach it.
Okay, I wanted to make sure I was clear because you said they're not coming back, and I know we already know that because they let us know in April.
And we
with
do
the
have
contract.
teachers who say they're coming back, and then over the summer choose other pathways and not come back. So they would have already received that money, and we would not be able to recoup the money. So if they returned at the beginning of the school year, and we paid that longevity bonus out in August or September, then we have known that they would have returned over the summer. And our classified staff would be back at that particular point also.
Mr. Chair,
Okay. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair?
Oh, yes, Ms. McFadden.
So they're going to receive that longevity bonus whether they come back or not. So if they sign or they don't sign, if they decide not to come back in August, regardless, they're still already going to have that $1,000. So whether they come back or not, they're still already going to have it. So if they come back, they have $1,000, can they get a sign-in bonus? You said just for the first-year teachers. Does every teacher get a sign-on bonus or just new teachers?
Just new teachers.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
New to Richland, too. Yes.
Okay, Ms. Agostini, did you have a question?
Now, I just wanted to make a comment, and for those that recall, I did not vote to support what was proposed and including the longevity bonus. And this discussion that's taking place is actually the reason why, because there's a lot of questions and, misconceptions or what we thought was going to happen. But once the board did approve this money, it's out of the board's hands to actually decide how it's going to be spent. Did we really mean to have it be a longevity, or did we want it to be a retention bonus? So that's why I didn't support it, because it's really out of our hands now. And administration, respectfully can do it, but maybe not how the board intended. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
All right, Ms. Porter.
I'd just like to comment on the previous discussion that we had when we made that vote. I did vocalize that I wanted it to be used as a tool to keep our teachers, particularly looking at those teachers who cap out at the 28 years. We did discuss that and mention that, so I was under the impression that it would be considered. It may not, although we just used the term longevity, it was a part of the discussion that we would use it to hold on to teachers as another tool to use, because we're being told that there aren't any options and it's hard to find teachers. So if we can use something, and this is one of them, I recommend that you consider it.
Thank you. Mrs. Nash.
I did have a question. I just wanted to know, was there a reason why we chose the year 1 to 10?
As opposed to?
5?
Oh, because then we would have teachers with 2 to 4 years of experience who've been with the district that won't receive any funding. So
Well, right, but they would have gotten a signing bonus?
Well, the
The
first year.
first year,
signing-
right?
The
The
first
first
year,
year.
yeah, their very
Right.
first year, but that just started this year. So prior to that, if they were in the district, if they were on year 3, then they did not get a signing bonus and they wouldn't have received, they wouldn't be receiving this longevity bonus.
Okay.
If that makes sense. But there was definitely some consideration. There were several conversations that went with this and trying to figure out, okay, if you want to tie it to the contracts, and then as Dr. Moore said, we give half now, we go over into the next fiscal year trying to track and give the other half. There were a lot of dynamics that went into the conversation, and then some of it was going to be a logistical nightmare to do that. And like Dr. Moore said, with the breaches, then, but we did take that into consideration.
Mr. Chairman, I had just
Mr.
one
Trent.
thing.
Okay.
Is that Mr.
No, go ahead, Ms.
I was
Nash.
just going to say, yeah, I still am thankful that we are going to be able to do something for teachers beforehand. That is something that we've been talking about for quite some time. And so I'm still happy that we're doing this. Yeah, I definitely think logistically there's work to be done, but otherwise I'm still glad we're doing it.
All right, well, who else had a question, comment?
Mr. Trapp?
Ms. Washington, did you? Ms. Porter?
To add to Ms. Nash's statement about starting at 5 years, I'd like for us to realize that a part of the continuing contract, that's also an incentive for them. So if you want to be on a continuing contract, you need to go through a process, which is what, 2 years, 3 years? 3 years. So that's the tool there for your first year first year is going to be your signing contract, but then the first 3 years they're covered because you want to get to the status of continuing contract. So you have to pass that. So I don't understand why we would, like what Ms. Nash said, not start later, because it would behoove them to finish their first 3 years for that status.
All right, is there any other comments or questions? All right, well, thank you, Ms.
Mr.
Williams.
Chair.
Oh, hold on, Ms. Washington.
I just want to clarify, it was stated, or did I mishear about when that contracts wouldn't be signed? Teachers sign contracts in May, so we will know who's coming back. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. The comment was made regarding going ahead and giving those teachers the bonuses because they signed, and then if there is a breach and they actually over the summer decide that they're not coming back, there was not a mechanism to recoup that funding.
So with that being said, they still would go through the process of they signed their contract. There's no grace period once you sign. If they break the contract, then it still would come before the board, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, thank you, Ms. Williams. All right, we'll move on to section 9, new business, no action requested. The agenda item in this section is a discussion regarding policy BBA, board powers and duties. It was requested that we add this to our agenda this week, and we're just going to have a discussion about potential changes. Is there anyone that would like to start off the discussion by making a suggested change?
Well, I think the kind of discussion started was about when we visit schools and the method of which we do that. I know for myself, I'm somebody who is a business owner and works, has a very interesting schedule. So being able to let someone know 24 hours if I'm on a lunch break and can happen to do that is not really something that I'm able to do 24 hours beforehand most of the time, because it's usually just when my schedule allows. But I still want to be able to go out to schools and, even if I let them know call the district or let the district know in the parking lot or 20 minutes before arriving, I literally go when I can. So if there was language as far as where it says visiting schools about how we let administration know that we're going to visit schools if that time period can be shortened, just for those people who do work, which I believe is the majority of the people on this board.
Thank you, Ms. Nash. Anybody else have any comments or concerns about the policy?
Mr. Trapp?
Oh, go
All right.
ahead.
Was that Ms. Porter?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yes, please go ahead.
I just wanted to add that there is language in here within the visit about making sure that your interest is in school affairs and not as an inspection, and it's a visit. So if there was any concern about not giving notice due to that reason, I just want to make a point that there's language all throughout this policy to ensure that even though you may not be giving notice, you're going for the right reasons. So it's there.
All right, thank you, Ms. Porter.
Mr. Chair?
Dr. Scott?
Yes, I think I was the person who asked that we place this on the agenda. And what I would like to do is just have the first paragraph removed altogether. Therefore, we're not having to give a 24-hour notice to the superintendent, principals, and other supervisors. If we just remove that entire first paragraph where it says visits to schools, that first paragraph, I would just like to have that removed.
All right, thank you, Dr. Scott. Anyone have any other thoughts or
And-
concerns? Ms. Agassi?
Well, the other thing is, in the second paragraph where it says, board members may make visits to schools or classrooms, period. And then after making arrangements for visitations through the principal or the various schools, that should be removed. So I'm asking for the first paragraph to be removed, and then the second paragraph, insert a period after board members may make visits to schools or classrooms, period. And then beginning with after, all the way through various schools, have that removed.
All right, thank you, Dr. Scott. Any other comments or concerns?
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Agassini?
Yeah, and I respectfully disagree with my colleagues. I'd like to see the policy stand as is. It does not say that you have to give 24 hours notice from what I'm reading. It just says board members should visit schools with the full knowledge of and coordination with staff, including the superintendent, principals, and other supervisors. So there's no 24-hour notification. I mean, that would be great, that would be kind, but the principals have been relatively receptive when we do show up. But I do have concerns without board members letting the principals or administration at a school know that they're coming, because I still think that some of our colleagues do struggle with what the description is of board oversight. So I do think it's in the best interest of our board currently at this time to continue to reach out to the principals and copy the superintendent when we plan to or would like to visit schools. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Dr. Scott?
I wanted to add, and Mrs. Agostini and I did have a long conversation about this, and I truly understand where she's coming from, but I often remind her, as well as other board members, we do not make policies because one or two board members are not in compliance. Policies should be made not only for this board, but for boards to come. And principals know when we arrive, because I do believe that we all inform principals once we arrive that we're there. And I would like to say that we have great principals, great teachers, great students. So if you're not hiding anything, it shouldn't matter if we show up, because the superintendent shows up and the superintendent is not given 24-hour notice. So why can't board members, who's the superintendent's supervisor, not show up? So again, policies are not made or created because you have one or two board members who are not in compliance. Policies are made for us now and for current boards to come. So I would stand to the point that we should not have to inform ahead of time, but out of respect, once we arrive, we inform the principal as well as the superintendent. And I can only speak for myself. When I visit schools, I always do that. But I can't speak for other people. But I'm not going to create a policy just because one or two chooses not to follow this. And again, as Mrs. Nash stated, many of us are very busy. We cannot give 2 hours, 4 hours, or even 24-hour notice. I know if my schedule, sometimes if I'm driving down the road and I'm happen to pass a school, I'm thinking, oh, let me go by for about 10 minutes or 15 minutes to drop in. I am not, as an elected official, going to call and ask for permission. And not only should we not ask, this goes for parents. We always say we want parents to come to the school, and it's an open door policy, and we're family, and we welcome you anytime, but yet we get phone calls. Well, I'll speak for myself. I receive phone calls that certain schools want 24 hours. That is ridiculous. And I would say to parents, when you go to schools and they're asking you to give them 24 hours, notify the school board, because that's ridiculous. We cannot work together as a team when we're requiring you to give 24 hours. Sometimes little Johnny need to see you pop up in on him. So we can't operate like that. So I will ask my colleagues, let's make changes to this policy. And also, let's make changes to get parents the opportunity to come in, because they all don't have jobs that will allow them 24 hours. They might want to just stop by quickly on a lunch break. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Scott.
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Nash.
Also, in agreement with Dr. Scott said, in Section 59, 1990, number 6, it says, visit for schools as part of our duties. Visit the public schools within its district from time to time, at least once in every school term, and take care that they are conducted according to law and with the utmost efficiency. So that is what is in state law.
All right, thank you, Ms. Nash. If I may take just a second, I usually look at things completely different than everybody in the room, so let me just share a couple thoughts and share an experience I had. When I read this and I read the first sentence, and I'm not necessarily agreeing or disagreeing with anybody, I'm just sharing how I see this. When it says that board members should visit schools with a full knowledge of and coordination with staff, I think that in my mind, that means that we're not to sneak out to schools. We're not to try to get into a school where by not going through official channels. Again, we've talked some about 24-hour notice and stuff. I don't see that in my mind. I would not read that into here. But and another thing, it says down here, making arrangements for visitations with the principals and things like that. When I was substitute teaching, I made the mistake one day. I had no idea what was going on I think I was at a middle school, and I signed up for half a day, and I showed up, and it was a testing day, and it was the most boring day of my life. I sat in a hallway in a chair, and when I tried to look on my phone to keep my mind, I was told to put the phone up. So, and
Violation.
well, like I said, it was the most boring day of my life. But my point to that is, there's things going on at schools sometimes that we had. I would like to hope that if we did decide we had an hour or so we could do something, if we showed up at school, I would like to hope that if they were doing something that we might interrupt something important, that we would be courteous enough to visit a school that wasn't testing or something like that. And I think that's what some of this language is about. It's about encouraging us to coordinate and do things in a way that it doesn't interrupt the learning process, something like that. But that's just, like I said, that's just an experience I wanted to share. Anybody else have any?
Mr. Chair?
Dr. Scott.
I would like to make a motion that on policy BBA, Board Powers and Duties, that under visit to schools, the entire first paragraph is removed. And in the second paragraph, that we insert a period after board members may make visits to schools, period, and that we remove to schools or classrooms, period. And then parentheses, after making arrangements of visitations through the principals of the various schools, be removed. That's my motion.
All right, I think on first reading, we don't necessarily have to make a motion and pass it. It would be my...
Right, but that would have to be something that administration will have to make note of and make the changes to bring it back.
Yeah, I think under the circumstances, we should get the administration to make those changes and present them at the next board meeting, at which time the board would vote to adopt or not adopt that change.
Yes, thank you.
So I would suggest that we do that. Is there any other changes that anyone would like to see?
Mr. Chair?
Ms. McFadden.
Under Public Relations, I would like to add that all state-mandated advisory councils should be appointed by the school board as required by the State Department.
That's under Public Relations. Yes.
Just add it on after that last sentence.
Okay, you're wanting to add a sentence to the last paragraph?
Yes, sir.
If I may make a suggestion, I consulted with our attorney today about some specific matters regarding a committee, and he pointed out to me that our board policy regarding those types of committees accommodated certain aspects of a committee that was being discussed. I think I would suggest before we try to modify this, that we look at the policy regarding those committees and make sure we're not making a policy that would be contradictory. It may be more to our advantage to make a change to that policy, and I don't remember what the policy is off the top of my head.
So was that a school board policy that you're referring to?
It is one of our policies, and I'm not sure where it's at, but he had looked it up, and I was working today when we talked, and I didn't have a way to write anything down. But that would be my suggestion for that. I would suggest we put that off and let's examine that before we make any changes.
Excuse me,
Yes,
Mr. Chair.
Magazine.
Could she just repeat what she said? I'm just curious again of what she wanted to add.
I wanted to add that all state mandated advisory councils should be appointed by the school board as required by the State Department.
And that is in reference to, somewhere in one of my two phones I have this recorded, but I'm not going to attempt to look it up. It is a relationship to a specific law in the education and health part of the education law.
Well, and I wasn't just specifically speaking of that one because I'm sure there's other ones, but specifically it says it requires that each school board appoints members for the advisory council. So that means that, and the reason why I wanted to put that on there is because under public relations, if school board members are able to make those appointments, then we're making those appointments for the people. Some of our advisory councils may have 5 representatives from the school district, and it's only made up of 13 people. That gives the school district 5 chances or opportunity to speak on something, and if they're employed by the district, then that's more of a heavy weighted on what's going to happen with instruction or anything else like that. The community really doesn't get an opportunity to have input. But if we as board members get to select who is on that committee and the school board still, or the district still has some of the people that they want, then the community is better able to be representative because we represent the community. So we're asking those who we feel like and we know in the community to address certain situations or topics. And it actually says in the law that the school board are the ones who appoint it. So law trumps policy any day. So I wanted to put that in there. And I mean, we could take the time to do what we need to do to go over it, but I just wanted to put that out there because it says that we're supposed to do that, not turn it over to administration to send us information back for approval.
Thank you, Ms. McFadden. Like I said, I would suggest we examine the policy that applies to the advisory committees before we move forward with that.
All right, Mr. Chair, I'm confused because I heard her say advisory council.
Yes, it is advisory. You're right, council.
Okay,
Council is
but-
the legal term used in Section 59.
Are we talking about councils, like student advisory council, parent
Well, okay,
advisory
so it's-
council, or are we talking about committees?
It's actually a committee, so it's an advising committee. So I wrote it down on my notes wrong, but literally it does say on the law that it should be appointed by the advisory committee.
Okay, the policy that I was referencing earlier is policy BDF. And like, I think it would be wise for us to look into that policy and see if it's changes we would like to make there, or at least save the conversation for later. I would think it'd be unwise to put something in here for next week when it might contradict that policy. And quite honestly, here and now is not the time to really examine these things and try to come up with changes.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Porter.
I just wanted to remind you that it has been requested that we discuss committees in the past, and I believe that's the policy you're referring to. So we've had a couple of meetings where it has been requested.
Actually, that is a separate policy than the committee policy.
Okay.
This policy is entitled Advisory Committees.
Okay. Will you send that to us, the one that you're referring to?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you.
But it is not on the agenda tonight. It is not on the agenda tonight to discuss policy BDF, so it would be inappropriate to spend a lot of time on that. I just simply brought that up because I wouldn't want us to add something to public relations in this policy that might contradict a policy we have. Is there any other discussion related to policy BA? All right, well, let's move on to section 10, the draft agenda items. Dr. Moore will now review the agenda, reading each section and agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our next board meeting is scheduled for February the 27th, 2024. We will have our call to order at 5:30 p.m., followed by the approval of the agenda. Then we will recess to executive session, where we will discuss student appeals, student admission request into the district's adult education program, breach of contracts, personnel matter regarding employment contracts, employment recommendations, and certified releases. Goal is to release back to public session at 6:30 p.m. We will then move to our inspirational moment and Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the consent agenda, which will include approval of our consent agenda, approval of minutes from previous meeting, and classified employment releases and in-district transfers. We will then have our public participation, followed by voting on executive session items, including student appeals, student admission request into the district's adult education program, breach of contracts, personnel matters regarding employment contracts, employment recommendations and certified releases, and as needed items discussed in executive session. We'll then move to section 8, which is unfinished business, action requested. We will discuss employment contracts, followed by new business, no action requested, which will include academic updates, budget survey results, presentation on budget control, second quarter financial report, and classification and compensation study report. We'll then review the agenda for our next meeting, which will be on March 12th of 2024, and then have our as needed public participation, executive session continued, and voting on executive session items if needed, followed by board and superintendent comments and adjournment.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Is there any, board members, are there any revisions or additions you would like to see made to the February 27th, 2024 agenda or to a future agenda?
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Nash.
I think it was stated tonight about the discipline, and I would love to see if there, like, I don't know how you all would come up with this, but what are the repeated infractions? If we are, so we can assess what is happening there. So I'm not sure how that works, but I know that I personally would, because it's not the first time I've heard this, would like to see what are the repeated infractions and how long are we allowing them to go if we're sending them back to class, and the reasoning behind that. If there's some sort of grid or some way that you guys can do that, and it doesn't have to be this next meeting, but I would imagine before, sometime in April, before spring break.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other?
Mr. Chair,
Dr.
and if I
Scott.
could just add to what Mrs. Nash is asking, and a clear definition of what strict probation means, because it means different things at different schools. So if we could get a general paragraph or something, what does that mean when we say strict probation?
All right, thank you. Is there anything else anyone would like to discuss about the agenda or a future agenda?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Washington.
I do have a question about an item that is on the agenda for the academic update. What exactly will we be discussing during that portion?
Academic update.
Academic update. We will provide an update on trends that we're seeing based upon our first semester data, as well as sharing additional, the notification that we've received from the state around our TSI schools, so that the board is aware of that. We just received that data last weekend. That notification, I'm sorry, from the state.
Thank you, Dr. Moore.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Washington.
so I would like to request for a future agenda item, and I'm often, as I'm thinking about what I'm placing on the agenda, I'm often thinking about how can we make sure that we are getting updates regarding all of the many phenomenal programs that are happening in our district. So I would like for us to get an update on our magnet programs, particularly what are some of the trends that we're seeing, where are kids, just give us an update so that we'll know, because I see a lot of phenomenal things happening, at particular schools, and I appreciate, all of the celebrations that we do, but I would like, are we experiencing teacher shortages in certain areas? Are we having trouble recruiting for certain magnet programs? Are all of those programs fully staffed and fully, are students getting the full experience that they need? What partnerships do we have with our magnet programs? I know my daughters and I visit Adventure, and we always stop by that beautiful med right there on the first floor. So if we can get an update on our magnet programs and what our magnet centers are doing, what are they seeing in terms of trends in enrollment? Are they seeing increases or decreases? And the reason why this is important, it's important, one, for academics. When we talk about the funding that's related to many of our magnet programs, we want to be able to make sure that we are prioritizing our student needs and that we're giving them the best experience possible in our program. So I would like to request for a March, before we go off for spring break, for a March meeting that we get an update on our magnet programs. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other agenda items we'd like to discuss?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Porter?
this is Ms. McFadden.
Ms. McFadden, I'm sorry.
Yes, I would like to remove item 5.4, proposed CHE committee, from the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, she can actually have that done at the meeting. When we
Yeah,
have the meeting, you can pull
and-
it from the consent agenda.
Yeah, we
And-
did that for this meeting. I'd rather not do that again, because what's going to happen is that this is the committee that I was referring to. I didn't know, I was hoping that this wouldn't be on here. However, what has happened is that we had this is an advisory committee. This is one of the ones that I was talking about, is mandated from the state. There are two specific roles, I will say, on here that are supposed to be for parents that are given to teachers, which makes this advisory council 4 teachers as opposed to 2 teachers and 2 parents. The reason why is because the district staff is able to pick these people. If the board selects these people like it is mandated, we will go to our constituents that we believe would be fit for this committee, so that the community has input and the staff has input. But what we have is the staff has picked everybody. There's also 3 specific categories that have 3 people representing the same exact organization, which means that there's not a lot of diversity on this committee. However, if I pick someone and each of my board members, which we are all different, go out to our community and pick relevant people who we believe would be good people on this committee, the committee will be made up of people the district staff chooses and the people that that represent the community are able to put on this board. So it's not just a big gulp of one organization having the voice for what our children are going to be taught and learn. Parents need to have a part of this. The community needs to be a part of this. This is instructional material about the health and education of what we're going to be teaching 4th and 5th graders in the sex ed. And that was put on the consent agenda, because what happens with the consent agenda is we go through, we don't vote on those. What happens is you go through and you vote on the consent agenda, whatever's on the consent agenda automatically passes. Can't speak on it unless you do at the beginning and pull it off. And I went and I asked Mr. Chair and Dr. Moore if they would pull it from the consent agenda so that we would be able to vote on it and pick. And I sent them a letter and asked them if the board members, which is mandated by state law, that we pick it, so that we're able to do what the staff did, and we pick our own people and come together and have a discussion. Well, I thought that was what was going to happen. Unfortunately, they did take it off. However, it's right back on the consent agenda, which means that none of you guys would know who's on that committee. Nobody would know because it's just going to be voted on and passed on. We wouldn't even be able to discuss it. So unfortunately, I didn't want to have to do this. However, it's right back on the same space with the same people still on there. And again, there's 4 teachers. It should only be two teachers and 2 parents. That gives the districts 5 people who are employed by the district to have a say on what our children are being taught. To me, that's not really fair. And then there's the other 3 are part of the district, of the organization that is in partnership with the district. So basically, whatever they decide is going to happen because the numbers are there.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Agostini.
Oh, I was going to say, with all due respect, Mrs. McFadden, when we get to that at the next meeting, if it remains on the consent agenda, when the consent agenda is called, you just ask to have that pulled, and we'll have a separate discussion solely on that. And it does not need to be seconded. You can ask to have it be pulled, and then we can have our discussion.
Yes, ma'am, I understand that, but I wanted to be clear on the reason why this is important, because we need input from more than one entity, because we are a large organization.
And Ms. McFadden, earlier when Dr. Moore read the read the agenda, she did not mention 5.4 for next 2 weeks. Did you miss that, or is that?
I just missed it.
Okay. Well, that's ironic, but it is unlikely it will be on the consent agenda at the next meeting, because you have raised concerns, and I share those concerns about the committee. So, and that is one of the reasons that I sought some legal advice on that today. So between now and our next meeting, in fact, when we have our agenda planning meeting, we will discuss this further.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to go on with what I would like to add.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
I would like to add policy BDF, advisory committees, and policy BDE, board committees.
All right, would you like, what were those, would you like them to make a motion to have those added? I mean,
Yes.
Okay.
And also, I'd also like to add, just like a letter, the legislative committee has comprised a letter that we would like to send out to legislatures, but I need the board to read it, make their markups, and send it back to us so that we can present it to them for a final draft at the meeting on the 27th. I'll have our executive assistant send the letter out to the board members this week for them to review.
Okay, well,
And that is a voting item.
Okay, well, we will, would you like to make a motion about the first 2 things you mentioned before we talk about the letter?
Sure.
Those are on the workshop. I would suggest that any discussion we have on policies other than the ones we've talked about tonight, that we talk about them on our workshop, which will be just a week or 2 after our next board meeting. I mean, that would be a better environment, I think, for us to discuss those things.
Mr. Chair, I agree. However, this advisory committee is going to need to be voted on at some point. I don't know the deadline for having these people on the committee, so I think that we do need to.
June.
Okay, June? Okay, yeah, okay, that's fine, June.
All right, is there any other discussion on the next meeting's agenda?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Porter?
this is more so a comment just in regards to some conversations that we're having about the proposed committee. I just like for us to be mindful of the language that we use when communicating about the staff in Richland too. I don't want us to be divisive by by making it seem like the district gets to choose 5 representatives, like that's a bad thing. We have to be mindful that our district is composed of so many employees, and those employees are indeed a part of our community. Those employees and many of those teachers do have children in our school, and their voices do matter. So I just would like for us to just be mindful of that conversation, and that it's not our board of trustees against our staff or the district. And so just being mindful so that it's not misconstrued in the wrong way, that we recognize our employees as also members of our community.
Thank you, Ms. Porter. Any other comments directly related to the agenda?
So just for clarity,
Yes, Dr.
Mr.
Moore.
Chair, for the next board meeting, we are updating policy BBA, which is the policy that was discussed for tonight, that Dr. Scott brought language forward. For future board meetings, we are giving a magnet update. We are going to have an update around discipline to include a definition of strict probation. Is that correct? For clarity purposes. You know how I feel about clarity.
Board members, was there anything else that we discussed that we wanted to have on a future agenda? Okay.
I'm just, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Agustin.
I'm just confused in the process, because at different points we're taking votes, then we're not taking votes of whether to have something on the agenda. And I agree with my colleagues in terms of, wanting to have a magnet update, but I think the discipline update could actually be something that could be incorporated into our discipline quarterly reports. And I know that I've received a number of times from Mr. Smith the contract that has what the strict probation is at schools. So, I'm not sure, we could have a conversation on that, but I think that's something that Mr. Smith can send out to the board so that we all know what it means when we send a kid back to school on strict probation.
Mr. Chairman?
Mrs. Nash.
I think that what I was asking for is not just the normal discipline report, but if we are having repeated infractions, that is a different conversation altogether. And while it can be put in that quarterly report, I do not want us to wait till April, because again, this is something that we've heard. We're talking about teacher retention. That is one of the things that they have repeatedly brought up is behavior. So I do think it's important, but I also want to give administration time to do that. So I think right before spring break is a great time. And in regards to, what was the other item?
Strict probation.
The strict probation. I do think it's important for the community to know what strict probation means, because like Dr. Scott said, I even just in certain meetings and talking to parents, when they come up to you, certain schools say this is what strict probation is, and some say this is what others is. If we don't have a consistency, we can't hold people accountable for what is not consistent. So that is something that we should have a discussion about. And just like we spell out everything else that we get in a board brief in this meeting, that should also be spelled out for the community, especially when we have people like the gentleman who came up today asking, what are we going to do?
Thank you, Mrs. Nash.
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Agostini.
And this would probably for the superintendent. Have we had a second quarter pupil services report?
No, it is scheduled.
Okay, so it could be incorporated in that second quarter.
Yes, it can. And the discipline report does include the number of incidents under that particular category. The challenge is, and what I believe you're asking for, Ms. Nash, is when it's a repeat offender student. And there are multiple reasons why a student would be making a bad choice and returning to the classroom, depending on what that student's needs are. And so, yes, I know sometimes parents, as a teacher myself, we get frustrated, but if it's a manifestation, for example, of that student's disability, then there's things that we put into place to address that issue to help that student make better choices. And so we can provide additional information. The question then becomes, what exactly are we looking for with that information? Because we can tell you, your discipline report that you received tells you, for example, how many students were fighting. But it doesn't say that Kim Moore was 5 of those 10 fights, which would then address what is the repeat offender. And then the question becomes, what are we doing to address that behavior with the student? And depending on the student and the student's needs, we do different things to address the student's behavior.
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Nash.
Which I totally understand that, but I think like, you know, again, like we are having teachers say this is what is causing a lot of problems. So for them to, and I don't know if there's a way to even separate that, I don't know. But I do know that it is something that we have to look at. We do have to address it. Like we can't keep going like this. Like we have to address it. I'm not really sure. You guys are better at coming up with those, you know, those types of things. But I do think the one that we do present, it doesn't give us that, you know, a scope of who is going back to class. And sometimes it may not be a manifestation. We don't know that. Us as a board have no idea, but when people go say, hey, I'm voting for that person, they're looking at, are we doing what we said we did, which was one of the things dealing with the disciplinary situations of our schools. So that's really it. And I fully believe that you all will figure it out or let us know what can be done and what cannot be done. I'm very easygoing when it comes to that. It's just more of, I do think that we need to know so that we can start looking at ways to fix that if possible.
Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you. Ms. Washington.
And in, you know, similar to what Ms. Nash is saying and what others are asking, I know that we get updates on, and these are the strategies that we're doing. But I believe it really will be beneficial for us to know what is working. Because I have heard teachers say, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. In our schools, we're doing this, we're doing that. We're trying this, we're trying that. We've got a new discipline, something that we're doing at this school, and we're doing another discipline thing at this school. And while I completely understand that school cultures are different and it might work at this school, but it would, and the reason why I'm going to go always back to funding, these things cost money. And so if it's not working, then what are we doing to fix the problems? Are we going to keep spending the money on things that are not working? Are we going to keep sending teachers to PD and having people go to their schools and teach and work with kids? What are we doing? Are we inviting community members who have thriving mentoring programs to come in and work with some of our students? Those are some of the things that I would like to hear as a board member, because we often say, what are the partnerships that are in our community? I get people begging to come into this district to work with our kids. And they have some phenomenal programs. And so that's what we want to know. What is not working and what do we need to do to fix it? Because if we keep spinning our wheels and keep spending money, then the taxpayers are going to look at us like, you're wasting time and you're wasting our money. And so how can we make sure that the discipline things become a priority in this year's budget as well? That's what I would like to know. And the other thing is, are we looking at the many initiatives that are going on? Because we have people that are overwhelmed with, I'm dealing with discipline, I'm dealing with this, I'm dealing with that. How are we looking at all of the initiatives that are on our teachers' plates, on our administrators' plates, on everybody's plates to say, this is not working, we're not paying for this anymore, we need to get rid of it. How long do we have in this contract? Is that a study that we're going to do this year as well? Because we are initiative overwhelmed, and I hear that not just from teachers, I hear it from classified staff members, I hear it from the top to the bottom. And so when we talk about discipline, let's look at the entire picture and see what's happening so that financially we'll know what do we need to prioritize and what do we need to get rid of. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Washington. Anything else we need to discuss about the next meeting's agenda?
Mr. Chair, I would recommend that we do a workshop to address the issues that were raised, because we are looking at everything that Ms. Washington or Trustee Washington has just identified, and we are assessing the effectiveness of those programs that were in the district, are in the district currently, as to whether they are being effective. And we have brought in common language through our conscious discipline to ensure that language is consistent from pre-K through high school so that students learn behavior. But this is a very complex issue with many different moving parts to it, as our board trustee has already indicated. So I would recommend that we have a workshop where we can dig into a deeper conversation around discipline.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
All right, Ms. McFadden?
Yes, we have a budget update coming, and I did send out an email of several items that I would like to discuss. I know Dr. Moore said that we would have a workshop discussing those, but I would still like to see if we could get those in a presentation form. Just the basic answer to some of those questions, not in the board doc, but during the presentation, just so we'll be abreast of those facts.
Thank you, Ms. McFadden.
And Mr. Chair?
Yes, Dr. Moore.
The questions that were asked are very detailed and very intense. We are in our budget cycle right now. What I have proposed is that we do our small groups as we have done with other complex issues that require more explanation. So as all of the questions, and I will send those to all of the board members so that they can see the questions that Trustee McFadden has asked, is that we include those are included in the budget process, but that we do it in a small group so the board members can get the information that they feel that they need and ask all of the questions that they may have based upon what they feel they need to make the right decisions for our budget for the next school year.
Thank you, Dr. Moore.
Mr. Chair?
Ms. McFadden?
However, I know that we'll have those in workshops, but there's not a workshop before the end of the budget season for us to actually go through that. So I would like to have at least some of those things. They're not really lengthy to be addressed. I mean, in my opinion, I think that a lot of those things can be answered really quickly because it's just basic information. It's not anything that we have to go into. It's just basically will help us to see where our money is actually going on extra things that, like Ms. Washington alluded to, that may not be necessary that we can pull back from so that we can increase teacher salary, because it's just basically about line items where certain funding is coming from so that we're familiar with where we can pull money from if need be.
All right. Thank you, Ms. McFadden. And Dr. Moore did say we would do this in small groups, not a workshop, so it would be a little different.
Mr. Chair?
Is that Ms. Porter?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Porter.
I think we also need to consider that some of the initiatives that we have are funded from school budgets. So while we normally get a budget report, it's about what the district spends overall, and it doesn't go into the details of how the initiatives at our schools are spent, because that comes from the allocated funds to the school.
Ms. Porter, that's actually one of the questions that I have on that list. Yes, ma'am.
All right, well, thank you all.
My point in saying that, I'm sorry, my point in saying that is if something is needed or wanted about those, I don't want us to all go to these small groups and you come out and say, I didn't get my answers. But if it's something specific to schools, you might want to make mention to that so that you can go in and get what you're asking for.
Yeah, there's several different ones kind of like that that's on those questions. And like he said, he'll send you guys those that information as well.
All right, thank you all for your input. May I please have a motion to recess public session and reconvene into executive session?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Agostini.
I move that we recess a general session and convene an executive session.
Is there a second? Is that Ms. McFadden?
Oh.
All right, motion has been made by Mrs. Agostini, seconded by Ms. McFadden. Is there any discussion? All right. All right, board members, please vote. Okay, let's do a hand vote. Everybody ready to reconvene to executive session, please raise your right hand. Dr. Scott, are you? Okay, all right, well, all right, that's 6. All those opposed? Okay. The vote is 6 yes, 1 no, the motion carries. We are We are now convened in executive session. May I have a motion to end executive session?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Agostini.
I move that we adjourn to executive session at 10:41 PM.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made by Mrs. Agostini, seconded by Mrs. Nash to end executive session. Is there any discussion? $10:41.
Mr. Chair, she's asking who seconded the motion.
Yeah, who did second the motion? I've been forgotten now. Was it Dr. Scott? Dr. Scott, did you second the motion? Ms. Nash did. Yeah, okay. Yeah. All right, there we have it. That looks correct. Let's all vote.
They're doing a hand vote.
We're doing a hand vote. Okay, all in favor? All right, it is unanimous, 7 yes, 0 no. Motion carries. May I please have a motion on the personnel matter regarding the superintendent's evaluation goal?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Washington.
I move that we postpone is it the voting? Postpone the superintendent's goals until the February 27th meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Washington and seconded by Mrs. Agostini. Is there any discussion? All right, is that correct, Mrs. Washington?
Correct.
All right, board members, please vote. Oh, good.
Hand vote?
Let's go ahead. Okay, all in favor, raise your right hand. All right, that's 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. In the interest of time, we are going to forego board comments tonight. Dr. Moore does have an announcement for us, so.
Hey, my mic is not working. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is with great excitement that I get to share some wonderful news with the board. Tomorrow morning, General Kelly will move from Brigadier General to Major General. His promotion has been confirmed, and we are excited to celebrate that wonderful achievement on his part. So congratulations to him and his lovely bride, and we look forward to continuing a strong partnership with Fort Jackson. And hopefully the Army will not move him anytime soon.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs.
I
Washington.
move to adjourn the February 13th, 2024 regular board meeting.
Is there a second? Motion was made by Mrs. Washington, seconded by Mrs. Nash. Any discussion? All right, board members, let's hand vote. All in favor? All right, it is unanimous. We are adjourned.